Ink ribbon.
Because you still get a little panic whenever Nemesis shows up. Because you still have that crush on Jill Valentine. Admit it. I've seen a lot of people request it, so I'm finally going to do a whole hour of facts, trivia, and lore related to Resident Evil 3. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a trip back to the beginning of the end for Raccoon City and Jill's escape from the Outbreak. Here are an hour of facts all about Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3 introduced us to the Nemesis, and he immediately became one of the most iconic enemies in not just Resident Evil, but in all of gaming, and today we are going to see what makes him tick. And I know there are 3 different versions of Nemesis depending on which canon you follow, but I will be covering all timelines in this video. So without further ado, you asked for it, and here it is. From seeing stars to sprouting tentacles, here are 25 facts about Nemesis. While he is mainly known as Nemesis, that name was actually given to him by fans due to the title having the word Nemesis in it in some regions. His actual nickname is Pursuer, and his official name by Umbrella is Nemesis T-Type. Nemesis was the first monster in the series to be able to speak, even though it was a single word. The next monster to speak would be Steve Burnside, then Lisa Trevor, followed by Brad in the Resident Evil 3 remake. Nemesis is actually a modified Tyrant T-103, the same type of Tyrant that makes Mr. X. Umbrella wasn't happy about the T-Virus causing limited intelligence and wanted to make something smarter, so they infected the Tyrant with a Nemesis Alpha parasite. This allowed the parasite to take hold of the Tyrant's nervous system, form its own brain, and control it. When Carlos is bringing the vaccine to Jill, once Carlos gets close to the chapel, Nemesis will stop pursuit of him and instead go after Jill. He will then begin breaking down the door to get to her, and you either have to take him out, or you have to get to Jill before he does, or he will kill her.
No!
Because Nemesis secretes chemicals, it turns his skin a brown corroded color. These secretions also have regenerative abilities, which is why he always gets back up. In the original, his clothing is actually designed to protect him, which is why he begins to mutate after he is badly burned in the clock tower fight. Unlike the drastic mutations of other tyrants who tend to grow large claws, Nemesis instead sprouts bigger and longer tentacles to use as weapons, however, at the cost of damaging his brainstem as they grow. In the official guidebook for The Last Escape, there is a section detailing how before this version of Nemesis, there were actually a few that were far too intelligent, obtaining things like culture, rebelliousness, and even an ego. These failed tests also attempted to escape from the labs. During the clock tower fight, Nemesis infects Jill with a variant of the T-Virus. In the original, Carlos is able to synthesize a vaccine extremely easily with almost no instruction. This is refined in the remake, explaining that Dr. Bard was ordered by Umbrella to develop a vaccine and had a sample of it on hand, although he was told by executives to destroy the sample vaccine in order to erase evidence of the virus existing. So, it's possible that Nikolai killing Dr. Bard may have actually saved Jill from succumbing to the virus. It's easy to miss, but at the start of Resident Evil 3 Remake, you can find the capsule that was holding Nemesis destroyed and opened in the street. The original voice of Nemesis was the actor Tony Rosado, who was also the voice of Dario Rosso at the beginning of the game. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2017, joining several voice actors from the franchise who are no longer with us. In the remake, there are certain places where Nemesis won't follow Jill, but instead will just watch her and wait, like in the toy store near the beginning. While Nemesis was programmed to hunt Jill and had intelligence to do so, by the end of the game the Nemesis is so badly damaged that his survival instincts take over and he is no longer being controlled by anything other than the will to survive, which is why he eats to regain strength, as well as being noticeably slower and less intelligent during the last boss fight. The Nemesis costume worn in Resident Evil Apocalypse weighed nearly 100 pounds and made the actor, who was already 6'7", stand at a height of 7'3", or 222 centimeters. In the novelization of the second movie, there's a lot more exposition on the Nemesis and Matt, explaining that both him and the monster operate as two separate personalities within one body, meaning he is fully aware of everything the Nemesis is doing. After being impaled during the fight is when Matt finally is able to regain control, which is why he suddenly helps Alice. When making decisions in Resident Evil 3, there are really only 3 options that have a notable difference when it comes to Nemesis. In the cafe, hiding in the basement forces a fight, but results in a slightly different scenario where Nikolai is at the gas station. When the cable car is going to crash, jumping out the window will result in Carlos not helping Jill during the clock tower fight, but he will give her freeze rounds. And on the bridge, pushing Nemesis off will result in him killing Nikolai later, meaning you don't have to deal with him in the helicopter. The reason behind his clothing is explained by the director of the Resident Evil 3 remake, Kyoko Sakata, where he explains that it's not so much clothing as it is restrictive gear. Unlike the properly dressed Mr. X, the Nemesis is a prototype and not a completed model, which results in his clothing simply being something that was haphazardly made in order to keep him restrained. This was also done to create an aesthetic contrast between him and Mr. X. In the original, Nemesis undergoes a minimal change, losing his shirt and sprouting more tentacles. In the remake, the designers decided this wasn't grand enough, so this was scrapped instead for a more drastic and notable change, which is why he takes on a more animal-like form during the clock tower fight. In the original, if you mix powders enough times, you are able to create enhanced ammo. This is specifically designed to aid the player in fighting Nemesis, since the rounds have a lot more stopping power. You can also create freeze rounds for the grenade launcher by mixing gunpowder C with grenade rounds. When hit with freeze rounds, Nemesis will walk slowly, and they do as much damage as a magnum shot. Only on hard mode, Nemesis will drop special weapons for Jill to use. These include parts for the Eagle 6.0, a rapid-fire handgun with a very high critical rate, followed by a shotgun that is also rapid fire, and eventually he will drop an item that can give any weapon of your choice infinite ammo. Normally, treatment plants are designed to break down sewage waste and purify water, but the Dead Factory is actually designed by Umbrella specifically to destroy evidence of BOWs, which is why Nemesis begins to dissolve once he's dropped into the chemicals. Normally, he should have just dissolved and been destroyed, but Nemesis was able to absorb components of the viral fluid and thus morphed into the giant boss that he is at the end of the game. In the Hong Kong exclusive comic series, Nemesis is featured to have both eyes, then losing one eye and having head staples put in after an encounter with Jill. When Nemesis is aiming at you with his rocket launcher, if you shoot it at the right time, it will cause the rocket to pivot and miss you. Also, it only holds 8 rockets, so once he runs out, he will toss it aside and destroy it to begin chasing you. In Resident Evil Gun Survivor 2, Nemesis makes an appearance as a boss. This is also the first time we see him in better graphics after his PS1 debut. Throughout the game are several spots where Nemesis gets stuck on level geometry and is unable to pursue Jill, giving the player a very easy setup to take him down easily. Some of these locations are the lockpick door outside the RPD, Marvin's office, and standing on this crate. During the Mercenaries battle game, there are multiple Nemesis enemies you can fight in one room, but if you position yourself correctly and get one to hit another, they will register each other as enemies and begin fighting to the death. While Nemesis didn't show up until later, the first host of the NE Alpha parasite was actually Lisa Trevor. Because the parasite ended up killing everything they implanted it into, they weren't able to properly test it. But after realizing that Lisa's transformation made her impossible to kill, they implanted her with the parasite to see how she'd react. Her immune system not only rejected and killed the parasite, but absorbed its DNA into hers, which created both the first steps towards the G-Virus and what would eventually lead to the Nemesis being made. And if you look closely at her tentacles in the remake, you can even see the resemblance to the tentacles that Nemesis has. Here are 50 facts about Jill Valentine. According to a 1995 press release, Jill is half French, half Japanese.
Who is it?
In the early 90s, Jill served in the army and caught the attention of Delta Force, who then included her in their 6-month training program where she quickly excelled in bomb disposal and lockpicking. In 1996, she was recruited into STARS by Albert Wesker. While in STARS, she kept her special training a secret, but was still referred to officially as their B&E expert, B&E standing for breaking and entering. Out of all the STARS members, Jill became close to Chris and formed a strong friendship with him, with Chris often training her in marksmanship. When STARS were in formation or maneuvers, Jill's position is towards the back of the team near Brad Vickers. Jill's outfit can be unlocked for Chun-Li in Super Gem Fighter Minimix. Jill's outfit can also be unlocked for the character Yuki in the game We Love Golf. Cammy also cosplays as Jill with DLC outfits for Street Fighter V. Including cameos and remakes, Jill appears in 12 Resident Evil games. Jill is the only member of STARS to wear a beret. Initially, critics loved Jill, praising the fact that she was extremely believable, not overly sexualized, and her relationship with Chris was based on respect and not romance. This completely changed with the release of Resident Evil 3, where critics, especially female ones, criticized her outfit and said that her new look undermined her as a character. Jill was born in 1974. Jill's blood type is B. She is 5 foot 5 inches tall, which is 166 centimeters. Jill was the first playable female character in a survival horror game. Jill filed an investigation on Umbrella, but was then hospitalized after the mansion incident, only to find out that Chief Irons suspended the investigation. In the original game, she uses her regular Beretta, but in every other game after that, she uses a Kendo Custom STARS pistol made with her own specifications. Jill has never interacted with Claire, Leon, or Ada in any Resident Evil games. The infamous line, "You were almost a Jill sandwich," was slightly mistranslated, with the original Japanese line saying, "You were almost turned into a sandwich." Jill makes an appearance along with Carlos and Nemesis in the PS2 game Under the Skin. Jill had plans to leave Raccoon City just days after the outbreak happened. While never shown on screen, in the original Resident Evil 3, Jill starts the game by getting thrown from her apartment, just like in the remake. When she tried to investigate Brian Irons, chief of police, he suspended her from the force and placed her under a 24-hour surveillance, which is why she was stuck at home. Jill is the only recurring playable character in Resident Evil 3, being partnered with the new character, Carlos. During the events of Raccoon City, Jill is infected by the T-virus and then cured by Carlos. Even though Revelations came out in 2012, it actually takes place before Resident Evil 5 and covers Jill and Chris's first years in the BSAA. Even though Chris had always been Jill's partner, while in the BSAA, Parker Luciani was assigned as her partner. Revelations was the second time that Jill was double-crossed by the leader of her organization. In Resident Evil 5, Jill had a second chance to take down Wesker and did so, but sacrificed herself to do it, leading Chris to believe that she was dead. After keeping her in a comatose state, Wesker used the first batch of the progenitor virus to control Jill. While normally this kills any test subject, Jill had dormant T-virus cells in her body that prevented her from suffering the same fate as Excella. After enough experimentation, Wesker was able to control Jill and make her one of his minions. It's only briefly touched on, but Irving and Jill did have some sort of dynamic relationship, mainly demonstrated in the opening when she was choking him and giving him an ultimatum. The reason Jill was blonde in Resident Evil 5 was because the tests Wesker had performed on her lightened both her skin and her hair. When fighting Jill in Resident Evil 5, you can either stun her and pull off the device from her chest, or if you're skilled enough, you can shoot it off. In the novelization of Resident Evil 3, it's revealed that Jill learned how to lockpick from her father, who was a criminal. The novel also explains that Jill wore a tube top and miniskirt in order to move easier and ease her escape from the city. While it's never explained why Jill explodes out of her apartment in the original game, the novel explains that she smelled a gas leak and shot a zombie, which caused the explosion. Julia Voth was the longest-running face model for Jill and considered by many fans to be her best look. For years, Julia Voth was asked to dress up as Jill, but it wasn't until a fan sent her a custom-made Stars beret that she finally agreed to do it. Jill was a candidate as the main character in Code Veronica, but the role ended up going to Claire instead. Jill must own more than one beret, according to the remake, because there's one in her apartment and there's also one on her desk in the Stars office. When researching the role of Jill, Sienna Guillory's favorite thing about her was the idle animation where she tapped the gun against her hip while waiting for the player to return to the game. In the Resident Evil 3 remake, Jill's classic outfit was altered and her skirt was made into a skort instead. Jill is the only surviving protagonist to have been infected with the T-virus and survived. According to Jill's diary, her main reason to leave Raccoon City was to find Chris and Barry. Jill is one of the only main characters in the series to not appear in any of the CG movies. Because he's never mentioned in the original, simply known as the Pursuer, Jill does not refer to him as the Nemesis until Resident Evil 3 Remake. Jill appears in 2 mobile games, the first being Resident Evil Genesis, and the second being Resident Evil The Missions. In 2011, Guinness Book of World Records placed Jill on the list of top 10 most iconic video game characters. After making my video on the top 10 Easter eggs in Resident Evil 2, I decided to dive into the next game, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and see if I could find any other deep hidden secrets, and I'm happy to say that there are definitely a few. Just know that some of these can never be unseen once you know about them. And with that, here are the top 10 secrets and Easter eggs in Resident Evil 3.
Number 10.
Creepy Sky Face. So I'm starting this list with this entry because I don't actually know if this just looks like a face or if the developers intentionally put it into the game, but if you get to this screen and look into the sky, you can see what looks like a giant white face behind the buildings in the sky. I did a ton of research but couldn't find anything, but regardless of its origins, it's something you can never unsee. You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to immediately pause this video because I have to show you guys something that happened while I was recording footage for this video. In the sewage treatment plant, I came across those drain demos or whatever they're called, the things that look like Chimera from the first game, and I saw something that I've never seen before. It's really fast, but I'll slow it down so you can see. It looks like one of them produced a baby or like a tiny one, and then I immediately killed it, and then I left the room before I realized what had happened, so I didn't really get a good glimpse of it, but I've googled this, I can't find anything. As you can see, something happened. If you guys know what this is, please let me know in the comments, but yeah, bonus Easter egg while I was hunting Easter eggs. So, let's continue with the video.
Number 9.
Enhanced ammo. So some people probably already know this, but I feel the need to put it here because it's very easy to miss, and I didn't find out until many replays of the game. As you know, mixing gunpowder with the reloading tool can make different ammo types, depending on how you mix it. At a certain point, you have the options to mix gunpowder instead of making standard ammo. But if you keep mixing regular ammo gunpowder, eventually a prompt will ask you if you'd like to create enhanced ammo. This applies to both handgun ammo and shotgun ammo. This ammo has a lot more stopping power than regular ammo and is able to stop Nemesis temporarily as he chases you, which makes the enhanced ammo great for stopping him in his tracks.
Number 8.
Nemesis drops. This is another one that most people should know, but in my experience a lot don't, so I feel the need to mention it. The Nemesis is a pain in the ass and can easily kill you without warning if you aren't careful. But taking him down is worth it if you can do it. Only available in hard mode, if you manage to defeat the Nemesis every time you encounter him, he will drop a special item. The first 2 are parts to a special handgun that can be combined to create the most powerful handgun in the game, capable of blowing zombies' heads off with a pretty high success rate. After that, he drops a first aid box filled with 3 first aid sprays. The next 2 items he drops are parts to a rapid-fire shotgun, followed by another first aid spray box. But if you can kill him for a 7th time after beating the game once, he will drop a special item that allows you to give any weapon of your choice infinite ammo for the rest of the game.
Number 7.
Alex Mack Portraits. Continuing the theme from the Back to the Future poster on my Resident Evil 2 secrets, the developers included another equally random background element. In the 90s, there was a show called The Secret World of Alex Mack, which apparently I'm the only person who remembers watching. Anyway, after you get to the clock tower area, on this screen you can see this portrait of none other than Alex Mack. Maybe the company that gave her powers was actually Umbrella.
Number 6.
Resident Evil 4 poster. This one is well known but also easily missed, so I thought I'd put it on this list anyway. If you look closely at several walls, mainly the walls outside of the front of the restaurant where you meet Carlos, you can see a big poster for Biohazard 4. It was being developed at the same time as this game, but that project ended up becoming Devil May Cry. There's actually a lot of stuff hidden in the background in this game. Most are a bit obvious, such as the Dino Crisis posters and the Capcom insignia.
Number 5.
Shooting Nemesis's rockets. As we know in certain points of the game, Nemesis will be equipped with a rocket launcher to fire at Jill and can make him a lot more dangerous. Veteran badasses controlling Jill probably know this, but you can actually take care of it pretty easily if you know what you're doing. When he aims the rocket launcher at you, aim in the right direction as he's firing. If you shoot it, it will cause the rocket launcher to pivot, which sends the rocket flying in a direction away from Jill and can prevent her from being hit by it. You can also just run around and try to avoid them, but this is way more fun. And his rocket launcher only holds 8 rockets. Once he's out of ammo, he will toss it aside and come running after you.
Number 4.
Back to the Future. If you watched my Resident Evil 2 Secrets video, you already know there's a picture from the Back to the Future movies in the STARS office, albeit with a slight color palette shift. Well, in Resident Evil 3 there are actually 2 references to Back to the Future at the Stagla gas station. First we have the infamous DeLorean parked right outside. Then if you go inside, you can see this picture from the STARS office again, as well as a few interesting pictures, such as this one from the movie 4 Weddings and a Funeral. I wasn't able to make out the other ones, but if any of you guys do, let me know in the comments.
Number 3.
Shooting street lamps. Throughout the game there are explosive barrels that you can shoot, resulting in a big explosion. But most people don't know about the exploding lamps. In the big fountain area before you go into the sewage treatment plant, you can actually shoot these lamps, resulting in a big explosion. As to why they chose this area, I'm not sure because they aren't really that useful, but still cool nonetheless.
Number 2.
Ivy. During the fight with Nemesis in the acid room, there's a lot to see. One of the more interesting things you will notice is under the dead scientist who gives you the keycard, if you look closely you can see a dead Ivy plant monster from Resident Evil 2. How it got here nobody knows, but I guess the same can be said about the dead tyrants towards the end of the game.
Number 1.
Resident Evil 2 crash site. This is by far my favorite Easter egg in Resident Evil 3, but it's completely easy to miss. Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 storylines overlap and there is some crossover, such as entering the RPD right after Leon and Claire. Or before, I'm honestly not 100% sure on that. But one of the more interesting crossovers here is near the subway car. If you pay close attention to the background, that's actually the crash site where the semi-truck hit Leon's squad car at the beginning of Resident Evil 2. It's such a small detail, but it's so cool to see that amount of planning put in by the developers. And that's it for this list. I tried really hard to find as many Easter eggs as I could, but there weren't too many in this game to be honest. Carlos joins the ranks of Resident Evil characters that we saw once, and they never came back. Except for the fact that he actually did come back in the Resident Evil 3 remake. So what's going on under all that crazy mercenary hair? Today we're going to find out in yet another facts video. From pushing bells to plastic surgery, here are 25 facts about Carlos Oliveira. Carlos was named after Canadian MMA fighter Carlos Newton by Mercenaries designer Yasuhisa Kawamura, as he was a big fan of the sport. Carlos was actually pretty young during the events of the third game, being only 21 years old and making him 2 years younger than Jill. Carlos was a child soldier, being a member of a communist guerrilla organization in South America. In the Hong Kong comics, Carlos and Leon meet up and team up in order to save Sherry. While these comics aren't canon, Yasuhisa Kawamura, who wrote the story for Resident Evil 3, said that he loved them and complimented the author's work. While Carlos has appeared in 4 Resident Evil games, every single one of them is some sort of retelling of Resident Evil 3. These include the original Resident Evil 3, Umbrella Chronicles, Operation Raccoon City, and Resident Evil 3 Remake. Carlos's country of origin has never been confirmed, with Kazuhiro Aoyama, the director of Resident Evil 3, stating in an interview that he actually can't remember what his country of origin is or if they even decided on one. The most agreed upon nationality for Carlos is Portuguese, due to him having a Portuguese last name, but there is a scene in Umbrella Chronicles where he calls Jill Chica, which is typically used in Spanish.
This happened in the first place.
Hey, easy, Chica. I'm just a hired gun.
And there's also the fact that the game manual says that he carries some Indian blood, so it's still very much up for debate. In the games, his last name is spelled as Oliveira, but in the films, it's spelled as Oliveira, and there's never an explanation given for this. Oded Fehr, who played Carlos in the films, actually hates guns in real life and did not enjoy doing a lot of the action scenes. Also, random piece of trivia, he played the Gigolo in Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo. Canonically, Carlos has never met any other main characters in the series besides Jill and Nikolai. Anyone else that he met died during the events of Raccoon City, leaving him isolated from the rest of the storyline. In the news office, if the player chooses to jump out the window, you will see a scene with Carlos having to kill Murphy in the sales office, being visibly upset at having to kill his friend.
I don't want to shoot you. Kill me. I finished. Not human. Wait, we don't have to do this. Please hurry. Before I lose conscious. Before too late. Kill me! Yeah! Murphy. Why? No.
When you have to make the choice in the cable car, the game splits up Jill and Carlos. If you jump out the window, Carlos screams no and stays in the cable car as it crashes.
It's useless.
No!
But if you use the brakes, you'll hear a window break as Carlos jumps out of the car instead.
This must be it.
There was apparently a deleted dialogue between Murphy and Carlos where he explains the water puzzle, explaining that he was infected by drinking contaminated water. From what I read, this was cut so late in development that it was even recorded by the voice actors, but I could not find any concrete proof of this, so take it with a grain of salt. Carlos's original voice actor, Vince Corazza, is still voice acting today and has been in a ton of franchises in gaming and other media, and is also the English voice of Tuxedo Mask in Sailor Moon. The bell that Carlos has to push to clear the way is actually extremely heavy. I looked up the weight of church bells in real life, and considering the bell's diameter, it would weigh somewhere between 600 and 900 pounds. According to his face model, Carlos's redesign was to reflect a more realistic portrayal of his hardened mercenary background. Even though it never appears in the game, Carlos is seen briefly using the classic 4-barrel M66 rocket launcher. Carlos is one of the playable characters in Operation Mad Jackal, or as it's more commonly known, the Mercenaries. Mikhail is considered the easiest, and Nikolai is considered the hardest, where Carlos is somewhere in the middle. In the clock tower section, if Jill jumps out the window, Carlos will give her freeze rounds, but he won't help her during the Nemesis fight. If Jill used the emergency brakes, Carlos won't give her any ammo, but he will take out Nemesis's rocket launcher just before the fight starts. In the RPD, Carlos has a lot of quips if you examine the environment, including observations about the decor,
Now here's a weird fucking door.
Leave it. We're here for Bard.
and sympathy for Leon.
Somebody didn't have time to put his blues on.
Carlos is the first and only Resident Evil character to get an alternate hairstyle instead of a full alternate costume. While he never officially got an alternate costume, in one of his cards for Biohazard Clan Master, he is shown wearing what appears to be a Native American-inspired outfit. Carlos was rescued by Umbrella after government forces wiped out his faction and sentenced him to be executed. Just before he was to be killed, a scout for Umbrella offered him a contract to work for Umbrella's private military unit in exchange for a new life. Carlos has had plastic surgery to alter his face. According to his backstory, after being rescued by Umbrella, he made enough money to permanently hide his identity by altering his face, though it's never revealed exactly how drastic of a change it was. It's also implied that he may have undergone plastic surgery again after the events of Resident Evil 3, but I couldn't find too much information on that. According to the writer of the third game, Yasuhisa Kawamura, he stated that after the events of Raccoon City's destruction, Carlos had one last drink with Jill and headed through Mexico and ended up in Chile, presumably to live permanently. The game that introduced the Nemesis and gave us the opportunity to really explore Raccoon City returns over 20 years later in Resident Evil 3 Remake. Completely reimagined from the ground up, this game subverted expectations, changing everything from the characters to the environments. Today I will be showing you some of the things I was able to find within the game, and hopefully you learn something new. Here are 10 secrets and Easter eggs in Resident Evil 3 Remake.
Number 10.
Jill's apartment. Since you start the game in Jill's apartment, I figured this would be a good place to start this list, especially since it's filled with quite a few Easter eggs. On Jill's fridge, you can see a few things, including a green herb magnet, a kendo gun sticker, and photos of a dog. This dog can also be found in photos on her desk, and it's worth noting that this is the same dog in the picture frame on her desk in the STARS office. One really cool nod to the original is this book right here, which is actually the mercenary's diary from the original game. Looking next at Jill's bulletin board, we see that she was investigating Umbrella and seemed to trace them back to Chief Irons. Looks like she was on the right track. Also found is a file titled Unsealed Envelope, which shows a letter she was getting ready to send detailing how she can't leave her apartment and she's constantly being watched by strange men. It looks like she was about to send her investigation findings to someone, most likely Barry or Chris, but she didn't get the chance. This is also elaborated in the other file, Message from a Colleague, where Brad talks about how Jill was suspended from the force by Chief Irons, and she's being observed so closely that he had to give the pizza guy the note just to get it to her undetected. When the phone rings, if you take your time answering it, Jill has a few extra lines of dialogue.
Who could that be? All right, I'm coming. Just a sec. Or you could call back.
Two nods to her classic STARS roots can be found, including her beret sitting on a shelf, and in the cutscene when Nemesis breaks in, it's easy to miss, but she actually uses her samurai edge to defend herself, but ends up dropping it during her frantic escape from him.
Number 9.
Outbreak references. Throughout the game are a ton of references to Resident Evil Outbreak. In Outbreak, there are secret items known as SP items that we never see and only had descriptions to tell you what they were. Among these SP items were the umbrella noodles, which can be seen in advertisements in some areas. There are also ads for the Elephant Restaurant, which is in the zoo level of Outbreak File 2, as well as ads for Zapata Beer, which is featured on an enormous billboard before the final boss fight against Nyx. Kite Bros Railway is also the same railway company from Outbreak, and there is speculation as to whether or not the note you find near the shotgun called Subway Worker's Memo was actually written by Jim Chapman, since it uses a similar speech pattern as him. Here's an Outbreak nod that is pretty easy to miss. After climbing over the fire truck, if you go up to one of the cop cars, you can hear a radio call that mentions being trapped with 3 civilians and is very reminiscent of Outbreak, especially with the voice on the radio speculated to be Kevin Ryman.
RPD dispatch, this is 153. I'm trapped in North Garden with 3 civilians. West side, cafeteria, back of the kitchen. One of us is injured and immobilized. Please advise.
None of this is confirmed, this is just all speculation, so take it with a grain of salt.
Number 8.
Missing Barry. The original Resident Evil 3 had 2 endings, one where Carlos pilots a helicopter and they escape, and one where Barry flies in and rescues both of them.
Thanks, you saved us.
I couldn't let you die.
Is it you?
Are you ready to finish this?
Most people, myself included, assumed that the Barry ending was canon, but turns out Capcom thought differently, and Barry never appears, as there is only one ending. There's no official reason as to why Barry wasn't included in the remake, but there is a ton of speculation. A lot of people generally think that it was to give more of a spotlight to Carlos, but considering Barry is a family man, and after what happened to him in Resident Evil 1, he's probably somewhere keeping his wife and daughter safe during the events of Resident Evil 3.
Number 7.
Unlockables. One of the coolest things added to the game was the large amount of unique unlockables. Returning from Resident Evil 7 are the various coins you can keep in your inventory to provide some special abilities. Assault coins will increase the damage you deal, defense coins will allow you to take less damage, and recovery coins will allow you to regenerate health over time. And yes, they do stack. There are also the usual fun things like infinite rocket launchers and machine guns, but there are also some really cool weapons that we have never seen before in the series. First, we have the Hot Dogger, which is a glowing hot knife that can ignite enemies and cause damage over time. Since it doesn't degrade, it can really come in handy. Then we have my personal favorite, the Raiden, which kills pretty much anything in one hit, but the catch is you only cause damage if you hit their weak spots, like a zombie's head or Nemesis's heart. This is a great weapon if you're good at landing headshots. And one of the most useful unlockables is the Samurai Edge. Now, it's not unlimited ammo, but it's by far one of the best weapons in the game. If you combine it with 2 assault coins, you can do enough damage to kill zombies in nightmare mode with 1 shot.
Number 6.
Nods and references. Throughout Resident Evil 3 are a lot of references to 90s pop culture, including references to the Alien franchise, with both a poster resembling the real one as well as Sigourney's coffee shop, referencing Sigourney Weaver, the star of the Alien films. There are also posters that are nods to films like Terminator and Final Destination. One Capcom reference that's easy to miss is the sandwich board that Brad throws, which has Darkstalker's Morrigan on it. This is probably extremely obvious, but the toy store has a nod to Mega Man with this statue, as well as the various posters and toys.
Number 5.
Nemesis. The big boy himself has a few interesting quirks and discoveries in Resident Evil 3, but I'm sure that there are some that I missed, so if I did, please let me know. After escaping Jill's apartment, the container that dropped him into the city can be found and examined near the beginning of the game.
This logo. I should have known. Something wasn't here.
While he is chasing you, there are some places that he won't follow you. Usually places with no way out other than the way you came in. Instead of following you, he will just stand outside and watch Jill. While the items aren't as cool as they were in the original game, if you decide to fight him instead of running, Nemesis does drop items every time you're able to take him down. In order, he drops an extended handgun magazine, a silencer for your handgun, shotgun ammo, and flame rounds. Now, what is scarier than 1 Nemesis? 2? 3? Well, if this area of the laboratory is any indication, it looks like they were mass-producing him. Now, here's the thing. This room could either be mass-producing the Nemesis or mass-producing Mr. X. On one hand, this room shows a bunch of rejected tyrants, but on the other hand, this material coincides with the leathery trash bag material that Nemesis is covered in. So I will let you guys sort that out in the comments. Either way, the implications of this room are terrifying when you think of the possibilities. Another hint that this assembly line may be Tyrant related is outlined in a document. Apparently, Nemesis was most likely created at the Paris labs, which Claire and Chris both unsuccessfully tried to infiltrate, as detailed in the shipping notice file. It also talks about being careful not to shock the container as it could lead to self-activation. Whoops.
Number 4.
Carlos. Carlos is quite the chatty boy. Complimenting Jill's sassy attitude, Carlos has a lot of optional dialogue throughout his playable sections. Starting in the RPD, when examining the poster of Brad, what Carlos says changes depending on whether or not you killed Brad already.
You look better in the poster, Brad. Sorry, poster boy.
When you get the detonator, instead of getting the batteries, go all the way back to Tyrell for an optional conversation.
Guess we'll be doing this the explodey way. Got anything?
Yeah. I had eyes on a handful of survivors. They might be able to tell us about the dock, but they're cut off. Probably looking for a place to hide.
Then I better hurry.
In the West office, examining Leon's welcome sign will have Carlos say this.
Yeah. Welcome, Leon. Bet you had a kick-ass first day.
In the locker room, there is a note that warns about the body in the locker. Carlos will decide to leave that for Claire and Leon.
Better not.
There is a possible nod to Fatal Frame when he examines this camera in the dark room.
Well, if cameras killed those things, I'd be set.
And to finish off the RPD, in the STARS office there is an Easter egg if Carlos shoots the bullseye on the dartboard.
Oh yeah, the kids still got it.
Let that be a lesson to all dartboards.
And lastly, in the hospital section as Carlos, if you keep examining the voice recorder door, Carlos will have a lot of dialogue until eventually he tries to impersonate the doctor.
Dr. Bard, are you in there? I'm here to rescue you. Open the door.
No voice match found.
Voice match? What kind of sci-fi bullshit is this? Open sesame.
No voice match found.
This is Nathaniel Bard. Open the door, please.
No voice match found.
Come on, let me in, you piece of shit.
No voice match found.
Guess it has to be the voice of someone with clearance.
No voice match found.
Number 3.
Nemesis Parasite. Nemesis's parasite biology was changed to allow for better connection to Resident Evil 4 and could possibly have a direct connection to Las Plagas. It destroys the nerves that connect the brain to the brainstem and takes over, gaining complete control over its host. This is clearly illustrated if you are killed by one of them.
Number 2.
Chicken Heart. Brad will appear as a zombie in the RPD, but in Nightmare and Inferno mode, he will continue to follow Carlos along the west corridor, seen outside the window. Brad is the first zombie in all of Resident Evil to actually speak while already in a zombified state.
Sorry.
Now, a lot of fans have called it ridiculous or untrue to the series, but it's actually quite the opposite. Whether it's intentional or not, it brings it all the way back to the first game, specifically the document, Keeper's Diary, in Resident Evil 1, where you actually see the degradation of a man who is infected until his last written words are itchy, tasty. Throughout all of Resident Evil, there have been files like these, so I guess if a zombie can write in its journal, it's totally acceptable for Brad to say sorry.
Sorry. Number 1.
Fun extras. Near the beginning, when you run into Dario, there is a small exchange between him and Jill. Now if you stay, she will continue to try to talk to him, but he still refuses to come out.
Sir, what's your name? I can't just leave you behind.
It's Dario Rosso. And yeah, right. You just want to steal my safe house. Get your own, Missy.
Missy? Would you please calm down? I'm a police officer. I'm here to help.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you've been doing a bang-up job. You want to help? Go handcuff yourself to one of those freaks.
Sir, this is your last chance. No one else is coming for you.
I'm not going anywhere. I'd rather starve to death in here than be eaten by one of those undead monsters. Now leave me alone!
And for those who didn't know, there's a third dialogue that starts if you shoot the container.
Damn! She's trying to kill me! Stop that! You're gonna hear from my lawyer! Stop that! My brother-in-law is a lawyer!
I'd also like to mention that this is one of the few rooms in the remake that looks almost identical to the original game. This one is obvious to fans of the original games, but the song playing in the donut shop is the ending theme from the second scenario of Resident Evil 2. After the cutscene with Kendo, if Jill sticks around, you can hear this.
It's alright, Pumpkin. It's alright. That's a good girl.
The full name of the railgun used at the end of the game is the Ferromagnetic Infantry Use Next Generation Railgun, or FINGER for short. While areas like the clock tower are missing, there are a few areas that did make it into the game, but can be missed easily, like the alley with the boutique window. And that is it for this video. Now, normally I pride myself in finding behind the scenes information, unused assets, or any sort of cut content, but unfortunately this time around I really wasn't able to find anything, and believe me, I tried. But if I end up gaining any of that information, I will be sure to make a separate video.
Wow, you tax dollars at work, huh?
Now aside from that, know of anything that I missed? Let me know down in the comments, and if you learned something, be sure to click that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So a while back, I did a video taking a closer look at the ending results screens from Resident Evil, and it had a lot of views and a lot of really nice comments. So first off, thank you, because I really enjoyed making that video. But there were so many comments asking why I didn't mention the epilogue screens from Resident Evil 3, and honestly, I just forgot. But because so many of you commented about it, here I am, tidying up those loose ends. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, Resident Evil 3 featured exclusive storylines in the form of epilogue screens with a total of 8, and each one kind of gave us a glimpse into what happened to all the other characters in the franchise up until that point. Some are expected, and some are a bit surprising, but I think that adds to the realism and lore. Unlike the results screens, which were fictional depictions of events that never happened, these are the real deal and totally canon to the story. First up is Jill, wearing a business suit and giving some Scully energy. She's inside Chris's hideout, crouched down, holding his knife and looking contemplative. It's not mentioned, but you can see what appears to be a bit of blood on the floor. She doesn't stay long, leaving to find Chris as she is sure that he is still alive and probably looking to stop Umbrella. There's a lot to unpack here, and it's all really nice. Well, except for the whole missing Chris thing. But Jill being at Chris's hideout implies that even though they were separated, they still stayed in touch, and he trusted her enough to tell her where he was hiding out. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jill was the only one who knew where Chris's hideout was. Chris and Jill learned that they couldn't trust anyone, even being betrayed by Chief Irons and their captain. This also leads nicely into both Resident Evil 5 and the Resident Evil 3 remake, with Jill having her own struggle to escape. Then we have Chris, who I believe the kids these days would say, has the drip. I mean, look at that outfit. He's so cool. Anyway, it's hard to tell because of the text, but Chris is at what appears to be a nice cafe, drinking either tea or coffee. He also seems to be covering his face, and just took off his sunglasses, implying he's trying to cover his face and avoid being recognized, which is understandable since there are most likely a lot of people who want him dead. A girl is passing him in the background, catching his attention and reminding him of Claire. Which brings us to the focus of his epilogue, which is his sister. The description starts with the quote, "Please forgive me, Claire," which if you remember is the closing line in Chris's diary, which shows Claire is visibly upset when she reads it. Even in her PS1 graphics, you can tell she's defeated. What's even more tragic is that in the description it says it's his signature quote, which implies that he has written that sentence a lot and feels guilty for constantly letting his sister down. After that we have Barry, holding his youngest daughter Polly, with his wife and other daughter Moira in the background. This is probably the most upbeat of all the epilogues, though it is bittersweet. Barry, reunited with his family and probably feeling very relieved that they are okay, also has to live with both the regret of betraying his teammates and the looming fear that everything that has happened in the mansion can happen again. Barry apologizes and tells them he has to go because his comrades need him. His wife gives him a fake smile and tries her best to reassure him that they will be okay, but everyone in this family knows that's far from the case. As Barry had learned, once you're in Umbrella's sights, they don't ever stop watching you. It's unclear when or where this photo is taken, but it's notable because after the events of Raccoon City, Barry took his family to an undisclosed location in Canada to lay low, and he was also keeping in touch with Chris through Claire around this time, which was before the events of Revelations 2. Either way, this reminds us that Barry was struggling with his demons, just like his teammates, but unlike Chris and Jill, he had a family that needed him. Next is Leon, who has one of the most mysterious epilogues. He's sitting in an interrogation room with an unnamed government agent who is drinking coffee. Leon implores him to leave Sherry alone, which they both know won't happen, but the man takes note of everything Leon has been through and gives him an ultimatum, specifically stating it's a good deal. We don't get to know what Leon responded with, but obviously he took the job, which leads directly to Leon becoming a government special agent and being assigned to rescue the president's daughter, which of course all happens during the events of Resident Evil 4. Quite the promotion for someone who was a rookie cop for one day. This was the only epilogue to ever be expanded on as well, appearing as part of a cutscene in Darkside Chronicles.
And Sherry and I were rescued by US government agents.
We have the authority to do as we please with you. You and that girl.
Just leave her out of this. She's an innocent.
An innocent who carries the G antibody. Don't worry. We're taking very good care of her. Bottom line is, you have the experience we're looking for. So if you want this to end peacefully, you really have only one choice. Work for us.
It was later revealed that Leon made a deal that he would work as an agent for them, and in exchange, the government would guarantee Sherry's safety. After that, we have Claire, which is probably one of the most prominent epilogues and events in the series. It may seem a bit strange that Claire, in her caring nature, would suddenly just run off and leave Sherry with Leon, but that's because it wasn't the original story. It's a result of meddling by Hideki Kamiya, where one simple line drastically altered the Resident Evil timeline. And that line was,
"Chris, I have to find you."
This unapproved line led to Code Veronica, which originally starred Jill, to now star Claire as the main character and cause a rewrite of the entire game in order to have Claire reunite with Chris. But all of that aside, it's a very harsh reality of an epilogue for everyone involved. One of those people, of course, is Sherry, who is being questioned by an officer about her family, which, now having lost both her parents, leaves her silent. Instead, thinking about Claire and hoping that she will come back and won't forget her. In Resident Evil 6, we learn that Sherry was living with Derek Simmons to hide out, and Claire was the only person allowed to visit her, which she did often. So at least Claire kept her promise to Sherry. It's really hard, but you have to take in the sadness and shock that Sherry must be feeling, having to mentally deal with everything that just happened to her. I mean, we know she turned out okay in Resident Evil 6, but still. Next is Ada, one of the most impactful epilogues because it's pretty much the only time we get to know what Ada is thinking. Being the jokester character in the franchise, you're never sure if she's good or evil, but here it seems to reinforce that she has more feelings than she lets on, even crying. It was always a bit ambiguous whether Ada survived or not, but this confirmed that she was still alive, even before we saw her in Resident Evil 4. What's also interesting is that she seems to be saying goodbye to the name Ada Wong, which was her alias, but I guess Capcom decided to keep it. She's also making note of her scar, courtesy of William, and a permanent reminder of the events of Raccoon City, her encounter with Leon, and most of all, her own mortality. And lastly is Hunk, safely in his evac and showing his face for the first and pretty much only time in Resident Evil. The only other time he shows his face is in an unused model from Resident Evil Outbreak, which is technically not canon, even though it is official. One other thing worth mentioning about this epilogue, which applies to Hunk in general, the first of which being the phrase that originated here, "the death cannot die," was a mistranslation, which should have been translated to something closer to "the Grim Reaper cannot die." All that aside, Hunk sits triumphantly, even smiling to himself as he thinks about how he just escaped death yet again. And that was just a nice examination of the epilogues in Resident Evil 3, some of the biggest yet underappreciated story moments from the Resident Evil lore. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite, and also if you could add one more for any character that doesn't have one, who would you choose? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Until next time, I'm Kai Morgan, and as always, thanks for watching Ink Ribbon. And a very special thank you to all of my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. Your extra support means the world to me and helps me keep making content for you guys.